Everybody, we're starting the recording, and it is Friday, September 26th, and I haven't decided whether it's 126 or 127, but I think it's 127. And we got Steve Hodgman from Australia. So it's damn early, or damn late.
Well,
anyway.
No, here it's late. It's 10:35 p.m. on Friday, so I'm ahead of you, so to speak, in so many ways.
Yeah, that's
Thank
not
you,
too bad.
Arnold.
That's not too bad. So you're going to talk about some heavy-duty stuff, aren't you?
Well, I don't know. I'm just going to talk about what I do, what I've evolved, how my station has evolved. When I first started with WINDEV, I was really amazed at the number of ways you could do things, and I got carried away and tried at the time, I think. And my overriding thing is that I've been tasked with redeveloping an application that I wrote a while ago. And it needs re-implementing and it needs updating. So I'm looking at a complete business system on a medium-sized business here in Canberra. And the person who runs it is his own particular style of, he runs things his own way. He wants a customized system. So that's what we're doing. I want something that'll there'll be multiple standalone applications. I need to share the data across all applications. And I need to be able to include components of any of the standalone applications in any other application if I need to, and I don't know what they're going to be at the moment. It keeps changing. The other issue is I've got, as you'll see on my screen, I've got 199 data files in my analysis at the moment, and I believe I'm probably halfway there. It's a lot of files. It's a big system from my point of view anyway. What you're looking at here is one of my projects. It's a general admin, and it's only small. So what I decided to do was, over time, I've evolved a set of page down. A set of rules that I kind of developed, but I want to make it clear, I'm not a guru in this. This is what I do. It's not necessarily the best way, and I'll be very keen to get back on people who can say what I'm doing wrong or could do better. Lots of people have helped me get here, and it's one of the reasons I'm giving the webinar. There's lots of people on the on this group who've been very helpful. There was a guy working with me on this for a while, Vlado, and I got lots of ideas from him. He was a big contributor to some of this stuff as well. He came from a completely different background to C++, but provided very good help. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore in the company. And I've evolved my own development paradigm, and it's still evolving. And I hope that this helps you all get further advance with your developments. I've tried to write down these highfalutin development goals, and it all sounds very good. But the second one from the bottom is most important, that I will not be maintaining going forward. I'm getting old, I need to retire, but this system needs to get developed, and I'm helping a bloke out, really. But there will be multiple developers. So one of the overriding things is I don't write code that somebody else can't understand. So my overarching aim has been to create a structure and a development structure so that other people can follow what I'm doing and know how to work on an application.
Well, you got my attention.
Yeah, well, it's an aim, and I think I'm getting there. Because it's big, you need components. The only way to do this is components. And external components I tried first up, and they're great for when you've got a black box and you can see all you get in an external component is the methods and the things that get exposed. You don't really see how it works internally. And that's good because you can provide somebody with something and that's all they get. They change it. But in this kind of environment, we need to be able to look at the source code. So one of the advantages of the internal components, you get access to the source code, you can debug into the component, so you can debug the component parts while you're doing it. And it's good in a multi-developer environment, works well with the SCM. The disadvantage is you've got to be aware that because people have source code, if they've got the check-in abilities with the SCM, they can make changes that you don't know about. And that's bitten me a few times here. That's just a caveat I would say to people. But internal components work really well in this kind of environment. The way I use them is I have a master project. The master project contains all of my internal components. I add them in the master project, and I share them from the other projects from there via the SCM. Master project doesn't produce an application, it's simply a repository of all the internal components. I name my components by functional areas, like debtors or debtors pricing, as I've said. I usually have a base component which contains just really my data access, and then the application stuff I put in like debtor pricing is my debtor pricing application components. Another thing I do is I only use classes for data access. I don't reference the data files directly. I did that initially in WINDEV and I found it a maintenance nightmare. Partly because the data analysis was evolving, and I just found it too hard. I made changes, and yeah. So a while ago, Andy pushed his record class and record list class. That's been through various different incarnations. I've taken a version and modified it to my own needs. I've added things to it. Basically, I had a record class which consists of, which represents one record out of a table, and a list class, which is essentially an array of record class, and a heap of methods to manipulate that array to get bits out if I want it and whatever. There's also, it contains the methods to query that type of data. And and I'm trying to be. It appears like I'm trying to be a bit strict about naming, but I found the naming work if you're trying to adhere to it. Anybody who knows me personally will know that I'm not very good at this. I'm so inconsistent, but I really try, and I found it works well if you get the naming right. I used to use the members directly, but I found it was a pain because they didn't mean anything. The names of what's in the files don't mean anything usually. So I always create properties, and I prefix them. It's basically what the WINDEV standard is that comes with it. And I put the type in front and then the name of whatever it is. The classes encapsulate my stuff, and yeah, the benefit of classes, which is a whole talk in itself. I have a number of different class types in my applications. I have my table, the file classes, which is the record and the record list class. I have what I call IW classes, which will be explained later in the song. View model classes, the VM classes. On my screen, on my content screens, I do all my data access via view model classes. And then I have the application classes, which are what I prefix them with a CA, which are enhanced version of the table classes. I add features that I need to them. The other aspect that I've done is tried to standardize the GUI. In my projects, there was only one window, as in a win prefix. That's the project window. It's maximized. It has a selector bar down the left, a top action bar, and an into window control. Switching between here and here may not work. If I go to here, I'll run this up. This is my application window. This is my selector bar. I use the standard WINDEV nav component for that. And this action bar is dynamically built. I've got classes that build that. It's basically a tab control with buttons in it. That gives me the ability to dynamically create that and change it. This in here is an internal window control and load internal windows into, obviously, like that. So that's the structure of all my applications using this framework. What goes back to there? That's silly. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. This is very different. I also provide a dialog window with an action bar on top and a content window below. I'll explain that a bit later on. Basically, all the content that I do is in an internal window, which means it can be used in other areas of the application. And all those internal windows and the classes associated with them are stored in a component, which means that by including a component in other projects, you can then instantiate that window, and bingo, you've got that feature of the project in this project. The content window. I've got a master content windows with some defined methods and so forth, and I name them IW underscore something or other, where something or other means something useful, hopefully. There's an associated view model class, which is a CVM, C being the prefix for classes, view model, and the name of the window. And I have a IW class, which allows me to, this is the class that is originally instantiated, and it provides the interface to the action bar from the content window. And I've lost Windows. Right. Now, what I wanted to do was, I hope, is everybody completely confused? I'm happy to go back on that. What I wanted to do was just talk about the structure of an example window, because all that stuff's a bit boring to get it into some actual code. What I wanted to do was an example was this company price list screen, which is pretty simple, as you can see. It has a drop down. I can choose a company there, and it shows me the price lists of that company. If I choose this company, I get those prices. This window here closes it, and then I can log out, and I'm back in the application. Now, didn't open this window before. So this is the project that I'm talking about. This is my project window. And as you can see, I've got this is my action bar GUI components here. The company price lists button, the code for that, that's how that window is instantiated. Basically, all it's doing is instantiating my internal window class with some parameters, then it's a function to open an internal window. Problem with this is, so this is my internal window, and I have the way this works is when it starts, I have some parameters. It gets an internal window, which is effectively a virtual internal window type passed in. And from that, extract the view model window that was a view model class that was instantiated. And it's of this type. This type inherits from internal window. So I use a lot of class inheritance. and what I'm doing. Bottom line is that what I can show you is that, for example, the code to select a row of the combo, when I select a company, only code I have to write is I do a screen to source, which basically writes the selected company ID to the stored value, and then I display the table. How the hell does that select the new company, you might suggest? Well, the company content comes from a company list array, which is my array of companies. What it returns is a company ID, which is the unique identifier for the company. What I've done is link that to my view model. This is my view model class for the price lists, and it's the selected company ID. So whenever the company ID is written away with a screen to source, that value gets updated. So let's go and look at what that value does when you update it. So that's the wrong window, Stephen. Sorry, I was playing with this. Okay, just as a sideline, as you can see here, these are my internal components that are in this project. Basically, most of my windows come out of here and my data price. And under data pricing, I have windows, classes, and queries. In the windows, I have my dialog windows and my list windows. This is the data price list window. It has a corresponding class, which is the data price list class. And that's this one. Now, it has various members, but the property is what we're after. So we're after the selected company ID. So let's look at what happens when we write to that. So when we read it, it reads an 8-byte int. Well, that's fine. When it writes, it has a bit of logic. If the value has changed, what it does is it updates the selected company member. It then uses this code, which I've since outdated. This is an old screen. I can do that in one line now, all of that. But basically what it does is it assigns a selected company with the index out of the array. So I've got the company record if I want it. It also sets a flag to reload the price lists. It's an internal member of the class to say reload the price lists. And then I store this away so I remember that that's the last company that I selected. Now, when we're over here, the code, you remember, said that we did a screen to source, so we've updated the company, and then we've done a table display of the price lists. As you might imagine, this table here, the content for that comes from the CL price list. Yes. I always end things with a list. When you've got a price list, it's a price list. It just kind of keeps you awake. So it's pointing at the array member of that class. So this is the price list. So that's a property of the, once again, the view model for this window. So let's have a look at what that does. So when I go here, I can look at the price list number. Signing it doesn't do anything, but reading it does. When you read it, if the reload price list flag is true, and remember it just got set when I set the company, right? When I selected the company down here, it said reload price list is true. So because I've because it's true, it then does the fetch. So this will fetch the price list for the selected company ID. And it sets the reload price list false. So it only does the fetch if the company's changed, in other words. So that's how it does the load of the price lists. So when I run this up, I go there, selected the last company I had, and the price list. If I change the company, changes that, writes the company ID away, refreshes that list, which does the requery, and gives me the dummy price lists. Does that make sense, or is that completely confusing? Right. Does that mean listening?
Well, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no questions so far.
The other side of what I'm doing is get out of this.
Hey, Stephen,
Yep.
are you using indirection at all?
In various places, yes.
Okay.
I use it in my. I've got a pricing screen that wouldn't work without indirection. I can show you like it's a bit obscure, but yeah, I use indirection. But I try to avoid it if I can. But it's a good way to do things sometimes. Is there a reason for that, or you think I might be avoiding it because it's not a good thing, or what?
No, just asking because you have base classes and you have a structure that you wanna, and you have internal windows, so you try and create base stuff that gets inherited or used, and I thought that maybe you would have classes or internal windows that use indirection, so I'll just pass what table it is and it does its thing,
Yeah. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. I've found that you can do some of that. But I found that how I'm doing things, I will say up front, is not necessarily the shortest way, but it works. I don't know. Yeah,
Maybe it's
to answer your
clearer.
question,
Yeah.
I have used indirection, and particularly in my pricing thing here, this screen here wouldn't be possible without indirection, believe it or not. This is quite complicated.
So
This
everything
allows me to
is different. Everything is different enough, so it's kind of hard to.
There's
There's
no
only
generic
certain
way of
things.
doing things.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's a similar screen here where I've got subcontractor price lists. Yes, it looks like the company price list. It basically is the company done with subcontractor price lists. But it's a separate screen, it's standalone. It's something that's copied across, obviously, but it's a separate thing. It is its own entity. This screen here, this is a really good example of the flexibility of WINDEV, if you ask me. Because I pick that up there, and I can put him there. That all just works, which is very clever. So I've added Coombs to Canberra 1. And whereas in the same table, I can come down here. I can't drag that. That won't do anything, basically. But what I can do here, enter a price, and then I'm going to work out how to do this. Windows stuff is really weird. And then I can do that. And that's all been pretty useful for setting prices. And then
Nice.
and that refreshes, and bingo, that's all stored away now. This is a really complicated cartage pricing system whereby you have a region and you have a set of destinations and you have prices, and this is not all set up because this is my test data. But it's, yeah. So I use indirection. If you want to, I can show you how the classes work. There are classes behind this that load this array and cells, and that's yeah, quite complicated. But it uses indirection.
No, I was just asking in general. Yeah, I was just asking in general.
Hey, Stephen, I have a question.
Yep.
What database do you use?
I have a file client server.
Good. Copperfile.
Yeah.
Is it local on your on the LAN?
This one is, yes. The design is that it's close.
Okay.
It's designed. It's designed. The screens have been designed with the database being on the LAN in mind, not going over a wide area link. In the environment I'm in, that's how it will be. There's, as you, obviously realise, there's a whole different set of criteria you've got to deal with if you do it. Where was I? What I wanted to do was show if I want to add back to my very simple screen, company list. If I want to edit that, that brings up a dialog. So once again, I've got buttons that do things, and these are programmed. I can program those for this particular screen. This window itself is, as its name suggests here, a generic dialog, and I've called it with this name, and that creates the buttons, and it sets up the data. I can actually show you how that happens in here, because I have what I call the IW class. This is the class that's instantiated first, and in its constructor it does some magic here. But essentially what it does, it creates a view model class, which is a specific view model, and I pass in various other things, the application global, so I can do balloon tips and so forth, go through. What happens then, the way this instantiates, it then, this window is instantiated inside of this is my generic dialog. This is my content window, which is an internal window empty. My dialog window for the data price list is put into there, and it gets loaded. Now, this has a number of methods and so forth, this window, but I have some standard things. So it always calls initialize internal window when this starts. Now, where that comes from is in and it in the code for this window. When this window starts up, it sets up its the view model class and so forth for it. It then changes the source window to the window I want to use, and there's various other bits and pieces which I can explain. It then calls that internal window with initialize internal window. It then sets the size of the window based on some methods it calls, and then that window is instantiated. So when the initialize internal window of that window is called, what it's doing, it's calling the internal window to initialize the ribbon. This may sound a little bit convoluted, kind of is a bit. This is the class, the internal window class, and I have an init ribbon. Basically, the init ribbon instantiates some classes and sets up the ribbon as I want to have it. And the ribbon has some defined buttons: edit, delete, print, close, and they're set up with procedures that they will execute. And that's how those buttons get defined. They get defined in the class that goes with the window. Then what happens after that's done is we do a refresh view. And the refresh view method goes to the data model, view model, and loads the record, whatever that does. That allows that. Sometimes in my class, it does something, sometimes it doesn't. Then does a source to screen. Now, when this window is instantiated, pass a parameter in. And you see here, the internal window, the array of parameters. What I've done is apply a company class. So in my view model, there's a pointer to a company object. That came from parameter 1. In my view model class, pointer to a price list object. That went parameter 2. So that when, and you'll see here that this link comes from the company name, from the company object, which is included in the view model of the price list, and this one is linked to the description out of the price list object that's included in my view model. Similar for the dates started to and from. So that essentially a source to screen will bring those to be displayed. There's nothing really else to do. However, I go here. We can see here, go to the process of this one, that what we have is the load record. If it's greater than 0, it refreshes price list. So that's not actually doing anything, basically. It allows me to pass someone in there if I want to, but it doesn't do anything in this case. I then do the source to screen and set the hourglass false, and you see the price list and you can interact with it. To actually do it, to save it away and whatever, relies on the buttons that have been set up. The buttons that have been set up to save, for instance, will call the save record method. And this is a method that's pretty standard across all the screens. Save record does a validate, and if validates, it does a screen to source, as in write it to the class. It then goes to the view class and says save the data, whatever that equals. I can then define a return value if I want to. In this case, I return true to say it's saved okay. I set various flags, and I set close the dialog, which essentially is a way of closing the internal window from inside the internal window. I don't know a better way to do it at the moment. So the validate does the standard kind of stuff. If the length, whatever, and if not, I call my application global, the balloon tip that got passed in with the application global. So each project has one balloon tip object that it can pass around. It can be referenced from any of the windows. I only need to instantiate one of those. It's more a problem to have more than one, I think. And yeah, there's basically a set of things that come up, and away we go. So if I edit this, make that blank, and save it, it'll say, I must have a description. Or I can close and I can say, no, I don't want to save the changes. So that's a very brief and probably confusing introduction to the framework I'm using to develop the applications that I'm working on at the moment. Any questions?
Well, that must be a time saver to have a framework, that's for sure.
Yeah, I struggle with how to explain this to people. But what I've found is, yes, it is, because on the screen, I know how to create it. I would love it if I could make all this generic. So what I'd love is someone to tell me how to make it all generic. So it wouldn't, I share things completely all the time. But at the moment, it's harder.
Maybe a little RAD would have helped, but I don't know. I mean, Glenn could probably have told you, but you're so far, you don't really need that.
Well, I looked at the RAD thing with what you've done, Glenn. I haven't been able to relate it to what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's my inadequacy rather than the RAD and my frame of mind or how I'm doing it.
No, it could be, RAD doesn't apply, but it might. No, I don't know.
There's some limitations in the RAD, especially when you do class development like Stephen does and I do. I did discuss it with Jerome. Whether or not they, as a company, how far they will go with it, I don't know. But that's obviously up to PC Software how far they would do that. But part of the problem is that in the RAD development, the variable option, using the variable option, is not open for use. So all the things that you would normally want to put in there for using a variable, you can't.
Oh, you can't pass stuff in.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that takes that concept of templates wrapping classes out.
Yeah, I couldn't see a way to use it to do this kind of stuff.
But you did as much as you could, where you could incorporate reusable code, though. So
what I've done is got reusable classes, and some of the code is reusable. I mean, I've added some methods to the list class, particularly the record list class, to allow me to do lookups and get and add and remove and so forth methods, which I've found has worked really well. But I haven't been able to migrate to the way you've evolved your class thing yet. I kind of locked into what I'm doing, I think.
So Stephen, all the that you have up there above your list, are they coming off of a built by a class?
All of those, the contents of everything here is a class. My combos. Okay. No, there is one screen where I don't, but all these combos are coming from a class, yes. And they're loaded, by that method, similar kind of thing. Okay. And the same here. The data here is from a list. It's a class which is a list of classes, basically. And yeah, all of this stuff. This is all classes. So yeah, changing this, that's all loaded in all classes.
And your toolbar up, your action bar up on top, things get added there as part of the class where you. Okay.
The bar here is customized for the screen.
So it is for the screen.
This is for the screen. So here, you can take it, rebuild, change its name, goes away, comes back as this. So this is this is built for, and it's effectively custom to this content window. And that's the IW class's job, to decide how to allocate the action buttons that you want to do things with. The program flow is that if I click something here, it will action something in this window. That's how it happens. So if I need a new function, it's written in the content window, and you create a button up here. I think something I haven't described also, what the development paradigm has allowed me to do is to separate data manipulation from GUI manipulation. Something confused me, and I've found really hard to go back and look at stuff. If people mix data manipulation and GUI manipulation, and this is people being me, looking back at stuff I've written in the past, it can be really confusing to change it or to debug it, I've found. And this process of development means that the GUI operations are GUI operations. So things done in the GUI here deal with the GUI, and the data updates and so forth are done through the WINDEV class. And I've found that to be a good way to separate those things. And whilst initially when I looked at this I thought it wouldn't work, I found that it does work, and I found it's actually freed up the programming. And by that, I'm kind of what I'm saying. I go back to my, there's too many of these is the problem. So that what I'm saying here is that this code is I'm dealing simply on the screen to source and display the table. I'm not updating the data. That's done. That's the job of the underlying classes to deal with the data. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but there's no data manipulation in that. That's what I'm doing. A lot of my combos simply call screen refresh. Sorry, refresh view, sorry, which in this case would do exactly the same. So we change that to be refresh view, which is the standard kind of refresh view on every screen. Whereas what I found in the past I was doing was sorry, I'm interrupting somebody, but I just want to explain that what I was doing, I found, is that in here I would start selecting bits of data, and I would just get really confused about time. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. But at times I found doing it this way, it's dealt with by the underlying class a lot better. Sorry, who was saying something?
No, that's the true loosely coupled, model view controller.
Well, I was going to put that in my talk.
Concept.
You mentioned model view
So that's
controller. Vlado, when he came on board, came from an environment where that's what he did. Model view controller doesn't really work in WINDEV because WINDEV's different. Stuff's done differently. When you're writing Java or C++ programs, you can do whatever you like. In WINDEV, there are some limitations, as we all know. But what I've tried to do is implement some of the principles of that development paradigm in an attempt to make it something that is easier to manage and maintain, and for someone else to walk in and say, oh yeah, I need to fix that, this is where I go to do it. That's the overriding thing I want to have done. What I'm doing is not necessarily writing the cleverest bit of code. I'm writing something that can be managed, and my aim is that person won't be me. I'm trying to find my successor. If anybody who's listening would like a job, give me a call.
I always try and code for me 6 months from now.
Yeah, well, my situation is a bit different. I am getting out, and but I've kind of committed to getting this system up and going, and that's what I'm working on, and it's getting there. But I need someone to help, and someone to take over is what I'm after at the moment. So yeah, I mean, I think it, and also this has proved, this general paradigm has worked pretty well for that. It's proved itself.
Cool. Any questions, anybody? Otherwise, we'll let him go to bed.
Oh, that's things to do. If as part of this, I've just skimmed over what I'm doing. It doesn't really talk about the guts of how I've done what I've done, or how we've built this up. If anybody's interested, contact me on Skype or on Google+, and I'm happy to talk about it, how some of the things were done. I could have talked about any of the individual bits for ages, but I'm interested. But if people are interested in delving into the aspects of how some of this stuff works with the classes and so forth in the Windows, let me know. I'll be very happy to talk about it. Apart from that, thank you very much for the opportunity, Arnold.
I think it'd be good recordings.
No problems. I hope it helps.
Very systematic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay. So so next week we're not having a webinar because I'm not around. But we'll continue in October with 4 of them that you see there, and the one on the 31st, it's up to Tim, right?
That will be Jeff Graham.
Jeff Graham.
Jeff Graham, yes.
So
and it'll be a half
that,
hour earlier than normal. Yes, we are. Yeah. It'll be a half hour earlier than normal. Sorry, Arnold.
Why are you sorry?
I'm happy about that. I think by then they were on daylight saving, so it's sorry? Actually, and you are too, I think, at that stage, aren't you? Daylight saving happens soon over there, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
Ah, right. Well, that's good. I think we change here in October.
No,
so
I don't think it's till November.
This will be 12,
I'm not sure.
22, rather than 11/22 in a month's time. But anyway.
Yeah,
okay.
I think they decided not to freak out the kids on Halloween. So, alrighty, doing this, and we look forward to some breakouts. Some breakouts. So,
no problem.
Okay, I'm going to end the record. Yeah, I'm going to end the recording now. Thanks again, Stephen, for sharing.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.